The fact of the matter is, if you look in 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 3, the last words of David are recorded. David said that the Lord told him that he that rules among men must be just, ruling in the fear of God. That was the godly requirement for leadership. This age has nothing to do with justice. Ruling is all about power. The ability to control, to manipulate, to change the status quo to one's own preferred state. This is not something that's new. There was an Italian statesman named Niccolo Machiavelli who in 1513 wrote a treatise entitled The Prince. The Prince was released a couple of years after his work, but it became the seminal work for those who would be leaders in Europe. These European powers were taught in this treatise, The Prince, that the ruler's main objective, no matter what he was trying to accomplish, and I do say he because the ruler had to be a he, his main objective was simply to stay on the throne. Whether you're trying to make your country a better place, whether you're trying to serve your people, or whether you're just trying to build your own estate, you have to be able to stay on the throne to do it. So the treatise of the Prince addressed certain issues to help the prince stay on the throne. It addressed such things as if the ruler has to choose between love, respect, or fear, choose fear to rule by. Because people will fall out of love with you and they will lose respect for you. But if they fear you, it doesn't matter how they feel about you. So you have to rule with a strong hand. You have to be willing to break eggs to make omelets. You have to be willing to shed blood, sometimes the blood of your own people.
That's good.
To prove your resolve to remain in office. It also says that when a nation becomes leery of its leadership, it is incumbent upon the ruler to provide them with an enemy to hate. So you have to create someone that has to be feared and watched and fought to take the heat off you. This became the manual by which the colonizing powers ruled. Now, this is on the cusp of the Middle Ages going into the Age of Enlightenment. People are becoming educated now. People are beginning to learn. We're coming out of the age of serfdom and fiefdom. In serfdom and fiefdom, there was no middle class. Either you were a landowner or you were owned with the land. You were either a landowner or you were property. There was no in between. The effort has been to get back to that point ever since the age of Niccolo Machiavelli. And the reason he wrote this book is because he saw the Age of Enlightenment coming, which came in about 1600s. And this is where people began to get educated, began to get an understanding. If you check every revolution in history, it was never poor people who started the revolution. It was always the middle class, because the middle class was always educated enough to understand that they were the ones being exploited. The poor can't pay taxes. The rich don't pay taxes. So who's bearing the burden of society? So all of the revolution that was started up to and including the American Revolution was started by that class of people who were educated enough to understand the exploitive efforts of the ruling class. Now, when you look at Project 25, one of the first things that is mentioned, one of the most glaring, most damnable issues in that is the fact that they want to eliminate the Department of Education. Are you seeing a pattern here? Now, the next thing you're going to find out is that this has become a very, very classified election, a very us versus them collection. Remember, I told you in order to stay on the throne, you have to create an enemy. So now, what we see here is an us versus them platform by one of the candidates in particular. His group, his minions, imps, or whatever you want to call them, don't understand maggots. Yes, it's called maggots. The maggots don't understand that this nation is not about race, as they have been told. America is a classist nation. Race is a construct used by America specifically to ensure that classism remains intact. Tell you what I'm talking about. The fact that you have as much money as I have, the fact that you have as much education as I have, the fact that you may have as much land as I have, doesn't matter, because you're still not my peer, because you're not in the same class as me. I've made class distinctions that keep you out. Basically, your race is one of those distinctions that allows me to exclude you from my class. Your gender is a platform by which I can use against you to make sure that you never become a part of my class. So these people that are running around talking about keeping them at bay and keeping immigrants at bay and keeping blacks at bay do not understand that when they say they're making America great again, they're not making America great again for the local working class person. This is for the people who can afford to put millions and millions of dollars on the table at the expense of everybody else who's working. And it does not stop with race. It does not stop with gender. It stops with pedigree. How far have you gone? What class do you belong to? And what they're doing is they're using race as the main issue to keep those who are uneducated from understanding that we're all in this together.
That's right.
Harry Truman said it. Then 20-something years later, Lyndon Johnson said it when asked why white men vote against their own interests. They both said that if you could convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, you don't have to pick his pockets, he'll empty them for you. When I was in University of Detroit Jesuit High School here in Detroit, my 10th grade American history instructor, who was a Caucasian gentleman, told us something I'll never forget. We were at the point where we were talking about the Civil War, and he made the statement that the average soldier who fought on the Confederate side, 90+% of them, did not have a hope of owning a slave. So the question was, why then were they fighting to preserve slavery? He smiled. He said, has anyone ever heard of poor white trash?
Wow.
Never heard of them. He said, we have to understand that socially and culturally in that age, the only people that were below poor white trash were slaves. Because you remember, slaves weren't even considered to be human. So these people fought to preserve the institution of slavery because it ensured that there would always be a class of people who were under them, even though they would not benefit. In some cases, the slaves were actually eating better than them because at least you had to feed the slaves because you had to keep them healthy to work the fields. These people were on their own, and they fought and died by the thousands to keep people enslaved, even though their enslavement would not help them at all. And this is the same type of classist ignorance that they're perpetuating on these maggots today, who actually think that the only people who are going to starve will be black people.